Hello and welcome to the Beefy Tech channel. Today's video is focused on the all-too-expensive RTX 4090 and the 5800X3D. I'll be exploring exactly how bottlenecked you are by a 5800X3D when using a 4090. The resolution I have done all the tests at is native 1440p, and the 5800X3D is paired with a kit of DDR4 3800MHz CL14 RAM with tuned sub-timings. I have tested 6 popular new games at a mix of settings specifically tailored to how somebody would actually play the game. Before we begin, I need to mention I'm using the Razer 4000Hz polling rate mouse, which would further push the CPU to its limits. I'll demonstrate exactly what effect that has in game when we get to the Call of Duty section. Let's get things started. Alright, and the first game on the list is going to be Need for Speed Unbound. I was mid-mission, so I unfortunately was not able to escape and go into the settings tab so I could show you guys the settings, but I'll just have you know I ticked absolutely everything to max and then put it to 1440p, and as you can see, you're nowhere near to GPU bottlenecked. It's a full-blown CPU bottleneck. Now yes, does it matter that in a car game you're CPU bottlenecked? Not particularly. In fact, at the 100 plus FPS you probably don't care at all what frame rate you have. But I just wanted to mention that a game like this with a big urban area will easily CPU bottleneck you when you have a 1490 of 1440p ultra settings. Next game on the list is going to be Forza Horizon 5, and yes, I did just want to get the car games out the way, but yet again, you're CPU bottlenecked in Forza Horizon 5 in just the in-game benchmark. So as you can imagine, in-game that might be even worse or better depending on what part of the map you are. But yes, this is the extreme preset at 1440p. And as you can see, the 4090 is not nearing that 100% mark, or even close to it. But it's still quite a good frame rate. I don't think anybody's complaining with 160 plus FPS and the endgame 180 average FPS that Forza does get. So yeah, CPU bottlenecked, but it doesn't really matter for a car game yet again. Alright, up next we have Call of Duty. In the background are the settings that I use, and these are the settings that are competitive and will offer the most FPS in general, but they might CPU bottleneck a bit harder than Ultra, obviously. But then again, I want to do this test at exactly the settings I play at and most people would play at. And as you can see, in multiplayer, the CPU bottleneck is not that bad and the frame rates are really good. Remember, this is 1440p optimized competitive settings and it's getting between 85 to 95% usage most of the time. Yes, with a slight CPU upgrade, you could max out that GPU usage and see more like a 400 FPS constant, but in my opinion, this is a pretty strong result for multiplayer. Let's move on to DMZ. Now this is where things start to fall apart for the 5800X3D. As you can see, heavy CPU bottleneck within DMZ, and it's not looking like it's gonna be anywhere near to maxing out a 4090 anytime soon. Obviously, this is with very fancy RAM and with a proper undervolt, so it can boost its frequencies all the way, and yet it's still nowhere near to enough. Alright, so you guys are getting the idea. The Battle Royale results are the same. As you see in the top left corner, the GPU usage is nowhere near to maxed out, and it's a full CPU bottleneck. But I do want to demonstrate something interesting. So now look at the wall and look at the usage. Now watch me jiggle my mouse. Once I jiggle the mouse, you're going to see the CPU usage severely drop. Now you're wondering, why is that? It's the exact same spot, you're just moving your mouse. And that is because with 4000Hz polling rate, you're bottlenecking the mouse even further and losing about 7 to 10% even, which is quite a hefty amount. So, for any of you that have a 4000Hz polling rate mouse, I'll just tell you now that for Warzone it might not be the best choice because you are losing significant FPS for just having that 4000Hz polling rate. With it on 1000Hz, you're losing more like 4 to 5% when you move your mouse instead of 7 to 10%. Moving on to Rainbow Six Siege, I have good news for you R6 lovers, as this game gets a butt-fuckingly high amount of frames. Now remember, all you're seeing right here is with the recording turned to really high, so it is eating up some of the frame rate from the GPU, but theoretically it is a mild GPU bottleneck. I'm saying mild because it still managed to eat 30 FPS while recording, despite there theoretically not being a GPU bottleneck, but if there wasn't a GPU bottleneck, it wouldn't need that many frames. Those are the results with the recording turned off, so I think you guys are fine. At 600 average FPS at 1440p Ultra, nobody in Rainbow Six Siege is gonna be complaining, as you can max out virtually any monitor in the world. And last but not least, we've got Dying Light 2. I decided to not run this game with ray tracing and not run it at its absolute highest quality settings, specifically to test for CPU bottleneck. These are the settings that I tested it at, and I was actually pleasantly surprised with the results. And as you can indeed see, at 1440p high settings in Dying Light 2, you pretty much aren't CPU bottlenecked at all. In most of the areas, you're going to be maxing out your GPU no problem, and you might get the occasional dip here and there, but theoretically speaking, you don't have much of a CPU bottleneck at all in Dying Light 2, even at only high settings. Now, turn on ray tracing, set these to ultra, and you really don't have to worry about CPU bottlenecking your system at all. Alright, now what conclusions can we draw from the data that we've seen today? In the games that we have tested, it is proven that indeed the 5800X3D will mostly bottleneck a 4090 at 1440p and, the optimized settings you would use for each and every individual game. But there will be many situations where it either doesn't matter that you're CPU bottlenecked or where you just actually aren't CPU bottlenecked, such as Dying Light 2, where even on high settings at 1440p you can draw 200 plus frames pretty much consistently. Now, the issue comes in Warzone 2, where the CPU bottleneck is quite serious, and most of the time you're going to be seeing between 60 and 70% GPU usage with highs of 80% and no better than that. Not to mention that if you're using a 4000Hz polling rate mouse like I am, the CPU bottleneck issue will be significantly more apparent within Warzone 2 than any of the other games, and you might have to just back it down to 2000 polling rate or 1000 polling rate. For those of you that are just using a basic 1000 polling rate mouse, that will not be as big of an issue for you, but regardless, the bottleneck will still be there in Warzone 2. I am personally very excited for the 7000 X3D chips, specifically to see if that Warzone performance can be significantly improved. But anyway, with that said, I hope you guys enjoyed today's video, and if you found any of this helpful, please like and subscribe. I'll see you next time and have a good one. Bye bye.